So it is 7:31. So I call the meeting, the June meeting of the Lower Makefield Township Historical Commission to order at 7:31 p.m. And we have quite an agenda here today. But we're going to start with just a couple of formalities and technicalities on things. But before we get into that, we have a bit of sad news, and that one of our members is leaving us, Mitch. So he sent a letter this week saying he's resigning from the commission. I hope we didn't say anything to insult you, you know, but we just want to take a moment to thank Mitch for all his efforts, for all the work that he's done with making the ghost tour successful, and more recently with the work that he's done with on the America 250, really being our representative on that. So
Thanks.
thank you.
And now
Yeah.
Megan is here.
Okay, I make it. All right. So Mitch, thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Mitch.
It's my pleasure,
Yeah.
Yes.
as I will miss everyone here.
Please come by and visit us.
Especially at the ghost tour.
Yeah.
Thank you, the effort, yes.
I know where you live.
Okay.
Good, you can stop by and pick up the rest of the signs.
Second point is we were clarifying. So when the commission was built, it was built with 7 members. And last year, we extended that to be 7 members and 3 alternates. And we haven't really been very clear on terms of who are members and who are alternates. So tonight, we have 4 of the members present: Helen, myself, Kathy, and Monica. And then Mitch is an alternate. The other members besides us 4 are Tom Argentieri, Dave Verndon, and Victor Fiorio. So they're not here. So when they are not here, we can appoint an alternate to take their stead, in their stead. So we're going to appoint Mitch to take Tom's place this evening, okay? So he'll move to be a member for this evening, so we'll have 5 voting members this evening, okay? That's the second point. The third point, and most important, is that because of the technicality, we have to re-elect Kathy as the chair. So I can't make the motion because I am the acting chair. So would someone like to make a motion to elect Kathy as the chair for the Historical Commission?
I'd like to make a motion to elect Kathy as the chair of the Historical Commission.
Woohoo. Any discussion about that? I think it's a great idea, by the way.
I'm not.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Now I turn the meeting over to Kathy.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. I think I'm gonna just still have you kind of keep an eye on the waiting room there. All right. First thing, review and approval of May 2025 meeting minutes. Anybody have anything to add, change? Okay.
I make a motion to accept the May 2025 meeting minutes.
Second?
A second. Or did you second? Okay, I'll
Okay.
second. I don't know.
Monica second. All in favor? All right. I don't know. I never know if I can vote or not. We're going to skip treasurer's report because Tom's not here. He did send me a report, but basically our only ongoing expenditures are the archiving project. So we don't really need to do much with that. As far as announcements, I guess the only thing, unless other people have announcements, I figured this is the time for, I know Dawn often brings up events and stuff. This is the time for that, but Joe and I had some discussions with our liaison, Matt, who is attending via Zoom because I just let him in, and Mr. Kratzner and our township manager, and I am now sending in a monthly report to him that goes into the board packet. because we do so many amazing things that Matt would have to take up the entire meeting talking about us. So
Mhm.
this way, there's a one-pager in the packet. So one thing I'm asking is, as people attend educational events, to please send them to me because I'm reporting those monthly. And if you have any backlog ones, give them to me. All right. Anybody else have any announcements? Try to look. Okay. Existing business updates. Our main focus is going to be the historic inventory, but we need to do a little bit of a check-in around America 250 because, as Joe said, Mitch is leaving us. And he's been our main leadership on this. So I think we need to sort of figure out what our next steps are. Helen?
I sort of got myself inserted into that by accident, but I'm perfectly willing to go ahead and do it. I had a long discussion with Monica at the township meeting in the back before the supervisors came in, and she was very interested in the idea of doing the encampment in November of next year and having local kids involved in it. I mentioned your project, Monica. She thought that was a terrific idea, that viewfinder with, we'll think of something to fit with that. But, so I think I'm going to go ahead, and if Mitch can help me out with who to talk to, I will continue to look for that. I think it might be better to be funded locally than through these organizations, but we'll see. The supervisors were favorable when I brought it up, so I don't see why we shouldn't do it.
My question is capacity. I think, because what I was hearing you say is sort of volunteering Monica to do.
No, I think she was talking about the window, but the battle window, but that was voted down because of the cost, so that's not on the table.
I mentioned it to Monica.
It is a cool idea, I
It
still.
was
agree.
very cool.
Yeah.
It's an expensive Kool-Aid.
Yes, it is. That's fine. That's why I won't fight it. I get it. But yeah, no, I think if Helen's willing to reach out to the
See
the
what happens.
reenactors and see if she can put some together, worst things they can say is no, right?
Yeah, that's more or less what I heard from the Board of Supervisors.
So a question, and maybe we'll let Mitch just kind of update us into where we are with this, where the county is and where we are. And then I'd like to understand, I do believe there's some Slate Hill work that's being done for America 250. Could we just get, all in one place, a list of the things that we are doing for America 250? So, but why don't I let Mitch give us an update first?
I've been having discussions with Jennifer Martin, who is the executive director over at Washington's Crossing, and they, of course, have a lot going on with this, and she's very helpful and is willing to lead us a little bit and give us some information. Last email I got from her, discussion I had with her, I'd sent out to the committee on May 16th. Joe, thank you for your comments. And what basically was said in it was that we should make an effort to try to stick with a central theme, not try to get too deep, try to cover too many things, which we all agreed. She says she's willing to give us some support, such as sending somebody from the park to do a short outreach to help us if we need some direction, or to lead a hands-on drill, or to set up some colonial games or toys for us to use or to show as part of the 250. She said that she can arrange for a possible fife and drum, depending on their schedule, if we can work with that. There is a charge for these, minimal, but there is a charge. The fife and drum look for more or less as a donation than a quote unquote charge. She has the names and is willing to give them to us at a moment's notice. She also gave us a list of reenactors, about half a dozen of them, and who their lead people were. And if we need to, we can contact her for specific emails and addresses and whatever else we need to do to contact those people. Again, she really is pushing there. A lot of children's activities. Now, Jim has been attending the meetings with me, And he's been talking about it from the educational point of view. He's met with some of the people at the local school district about what they can do and the time capsule and things of that nature. One of the things that I brought up about the time capsule is perhaps we can work with the school to have some sort of a contest where whatever grade we decide can write an essay as to what they'd like to put into a time capsule and why. And then we could select 2 or 3 of those and get whatever it is that they said they want to put into and have them partake in presenting it, putting it in, and helping us to bury the time capsule if that's where we're ultimately going to go with all of this. The next meeting of the 250 PA Bucks is on July 10th at 4 o'clock at the Univest Community Room at the Penn Foundation in Sellerville. And again, I give you the address is 807 Lawn Avenue. I know Jim was planning to attend, but it's not just the one person that needs to attend. You need 2. There's enough going on there that we can miss some of the input. As it gets closer to their reality of delivering this, we need to be more vigilant, listening to what they're saying and what parts of it we want to partake in and share in as well. Other than that, that's the latest and greatest. I will be more than glad to forward the email again if anybody still needs a copy of it, so you can see what Jennifer is talking. But I suggest that Jim or Helen get a hold of Jennifer and begin where I left off on this process. And that's pretty much where I was at on all this at this point.
But then my question was, and Mitch, you already mentioned the work with the school and the time capsule. I like the time capsule idea because I really want to get it out of my basement. It would be a shame that 50 years from
That
now,
is the
people were
time
to find
capsule.
it in the back of my basement and say, hey, what's this? I should put something in there just in case.
Right in your backyard.
But I do know that, so maybe I could ask
Mhm.
Monica, I know that you were also working with the schools with Jim, and I think you had some ideas for Slate Hill. So could maybe just refresh our memory?
Correct. Well, the thing is, we have a million ideas and projects and things going on with Slate Hill at any time, and any one of them would be appropriate for 250 because we're just celebrating the history of America. And so it doesn't, we can do anything we want. And I think, I think at the very least, our 2026 ghost tour should be advertised within 250 in any publication that the county's doing as far as that happening. And we can, focus certain people on revolutionary times for that if we want. But correct me if I'm wrong, we're doing our continual researching, mapping, and nothing is specific to America 250 that I'm aware of. I know we've been trying really hard to 100% confirm some patriots, and I don't know if we're going to be able to do that ever, let alone within the next year. But we do have people that are buried there that were alive during the revolution and certainly were affected by it and likely a part of it, whether or not they fought.
Just interrupt you for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Keep in mind that America 250 is not only
Everything.
about,
Exactly. So
if you have the World War I veterans there that you can focus in on, or anybody else.
I mean, that's the thing. Our ghost tour itself is appropriate for a 250 celebration. So I think at the very least, we can call out the 2026 event with the 250 groups to publicize it and get it on all the lists.
But when Jennifer said pick a central theme, like, what does that mean? Like, because to me, that means there's somehow a focus,
Well,
either on a special time or year.
Well, we've been kind of all over the place. We talked about hanging flags on homes. We talked about doing events for children, a bicycle ride. We talked about McCalloch's Field and, of course, the displays and everything. And in her mind, that's all great stuff, but it's going to be difficult to accomplish all of them, that we should just narrow it down to 1 or 2 at the most and focus in on them. And she would give us whatever support we needed along those lines. She just felt that we were just trying to get too much done in relatively too short a time with too little help.
My take on all this has been Slate Hill's going to do something no matter what, and we can call it a 250. Helen, who's now, it seems, leading the charge, really wants to do this encampment. And there's nothing else that anyone on the group is saying, I really want to do this and own it and put the time into it. So I personally am not sure how the encampment actually gets taken care of, but if Helen wants to try, I don't want to stop her at this point.
One of the ways I connect it to Slade Hill is this Joshua Anderson's land. All right, so if you imagine that there is no canal, the encampment that actually happened in Lower Makefield of the local militia, the fourth, what is it, the 8th Brigade, whatever it is, Pennsylvania 8th, happened on Joshua Anderson's farm and Yardley's farm. Yardley's farm was right next to Joshua Anderson's farm, and it is basically Macclesfield. So you're looking at, if you went down the hill, or you walked up the hill, and the old Oxford Valley Road actually did sort of go down the hill at that point, originally, you would have been at the encampment. That makes perfect sense. We also have Peter Van Sant, we think, in that graveyard, who was.
But certainly his family. I mean, we can talk about this exactly.
Peter
There's,
Van Sant.
there is a Peter, yes. But no, I think to
We
me,
can certainly honor his, if it's his grandfather, fine, we'll honor it, we'll honor him anyway. It would be
Yeah.
perfectly reasonable.
Helen, I don't think the issue is linking it to Slate Hill, because we can pretty much link anything in this township to Slate
Yes.
Hill with a few days.
well,
I think the issue is that the implementation of the practicalities of running that big of an event, when
Was-
you're the only one interested in it, like, and if you think you can take it on, I want to give you a fair shot, and you can maybe come back next month with a written proposal. But I don't see you getting the support that you're going to need for this kind of event. I see what she goes through for the ghost tour, and an encampment to me seems like a bigger planning thing.
If they're even available at this point.
Because we're so far, we've been talking about this. I was actually reading all minutes for a year now.
Yeah, so, well, I don't know, I guess I got fired up again talking to Monica. She was, not you.
yeah, I understand.
She was very excited about
Yeah.
it. She said, yeah, let's do it. And then she mentioned, I had said, we also thought of doing a run. She said, we could do it together.
Well, that's the
Run
thing.
it,
If, mhm.
trail, we could do the run.
I mean, if Monica's willing to help you produce it,
Right.
I think, yeah, and to me, the through line, and maybe we just agree to it, even though it seems like the low hanging fruit on 250, but if we agree that the two things we're trying to do are revolution focused, we make the ghost tour focused on that era, and we do the encampment, and that's our focus, because we've focused on mostly Civil War veterans. We've touched on revolution a bit at Slate Hill, but we have a number of people that were alive or connected to people that were alive at that time that we could do a ghost tour about that. And I think if we just say the revolution, and if Helen can get backup from Monica, that's fantastic. But Helen, I think that's the big thing. And I'm trying to make it clear, I love the idea. I'm not producing it
Yeah.
unless I'm being hired as a consultant.
Well, the other part is getting somebody to support it, obviously with the deep bucket, and getting the involvement also of scouts. So that was the other thing that sort of came into my field of view was scouts are very interested in camping with a reenacting group down at Macclesfield. In November, it's pretty much done at Macclesfield. So Monica said, yeah, and then they could clean up the field after the event. So I'm not
think-
worried about getting bodies.
Right. No, I think getting the bodies there is fine. It's the producing the event. So I think Kathy's suggestion is
Exactly,
smart,
it's
is
fun
come with
with a plan.
a plan and see if Monica will back it up. And because I think we've talked from the beginning about getting Parks and Rec to help support this.
Yeah,
I think that's really smart. And let's see what the plan looks like and if the commission likes it next month. Yeah.
Agreed. I think that's
good.
cool. All right. That of course took longer than we thought, but now we're going to go to the main event, and Joe and I are going to split the tasks on this. So we're going to talk about the Township Historic Resource Inventory for the Demolition Ordinance. Jeff Marshall, if you could step up so that you can comment, and I'm going to have Monica help me share my slides. I got you. I am a Luddite.
Yeah.
Right there.
Okay.
I just want to say, this is our biggest public ever.
Really?
Love it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about process and content, and then Joe's going to lead the discussion on the specific properties. All right. This is why I texted her and said, sit next to me, Monica. And some of these slides we might use for the Board of Supervisors meeting when we get there. So why is this important? I don't think I need to read this to you. And if anybody wants the slides, then I'm happy to send it to them. But, you know, these homes are a tangible connection to the past in telling the story of this township. And I think that's fundamental. And I think it's something Joe and I've talked about in terms of Slate Hill, is for us to start bringing the stories wider, like Joshua Anderson. We've talked about his house, but there's a lot of people whose houses we're going to be talking about tonight who are also buried there, or their families are buried there. This is a little bit from the ordinance that is proposed. And this just talks a little bit about process. So what we're going to do for it is a brief historical narrative of each considered property that we're going to create. And it must have historical significance based on the following: A, association with significant events; B, association with significant persons; C, architectural or artistic significance. That is what Jeff Marshall is going to be speaking to. And then the other one is prehistory, and we're not really dealing with that one too much right now.
And I just want to point out that these are the criteria that are consistent at the federal level with the National Register. So how we are defining historic significance is consistent with federal level. So it's working at the federal, state, and local level.
Yes, thank you. It's also important to note that once we designate and the Board of Supervisors approves this list, that any property owner can appeal this determination. So we need to have backup that if a property owner says their house isn't historic, or however they're going to push back on it, we need to have documentation to support our position. So this is very important.
Will there be time for questions later, or should we jump in?
Do you have a question now? I'll take it.
Yeah, how do they appeal? So they appeal, we say, no, we have proof. Who decides who wins?
The board, right?
Board, yeah.
The Board of Supervisors. Yeah, so they have to send a written appeal that'll be heard at the Board of Supervisors. But I'm assuming that they would ask us to present.
And the Board of Supervisors agree, it's just majority vote, right? Not
Yes.
unanimous.
Correct. Yes, Helen.
Okay, so you are basically putting together an official document that would be eligible for submission to court for someone who basically gets upset with us. So we have to be bloody sure that we have the things done correctly, to just comment.
Yes, well aware of that. So the process
Kathy,
of developing the list that Jeff is working on with us is we've used both the 81 and the 2000 official surveys as a starting point. We are only assessing houses prior to 1900. Okay, we're not after 1900 is for a different time. Jeff was verifying age of residence, how old the building was, and assessing current integrity. And that's the list that Joe's going to be going through. We did not focus on any other buildings, only homes. We recognize that there are historic barns, et cetera, but that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here. I also painstakingly went through the 1990s resource list that was done by that commission, by Ralph. Bless his heart. He did so much good work that we are like looking at now, including those binders in the back, to make sure all of those homes were included. Joe also painstakingly went through the 1900 census data to determine how many homes were in Lower Makefield in 1900. We are not including any homes from Edgewood on this list. So some of the lists he sent out may have had those on there, but Edgewood is a separate historic district, so they're not bound by this ordinance. And then we're reviewing today to approve the list that we're working with Jeff to send to the Board of Supervisors so we can take the demolition ordinance to the next step.
But can I clarify something?
Yes.
There's two lists here, and we need to make sure that we keep them separated. So there's the historic resource survey. That's the work that Jeff is doing for us. He's creating a historic resource survey, as Kathy said, of the properties here. Okay. Then on the other side of that is the building inventory list that talks about the properties that are covered by the demolition ordinance. It's our job to build that list. We're using Jeff's list as input. There's other inputs we could use too. But it's the historical commission needs to build that list, approve that list, and send it to the Board of Supervisors.
Well, I'm very concerned about the Harris property.
Well, we can talk, we're going to get into the property.
One by one, is that what we're doing?
We're going to talk about the process, then we're going to look at the proposed list and the not proposed list. Okay?
Okay, so the 1900 census data, there was 121 houses owned in LMT in 1900. Our current data with Jeff's list was showing about 99 houses. We have no information on demolitions that occurred between 1900 and early 1980. So we assume that many houses were lost in that time period. I do have documentation on as many houses that I was able to track down demolitions since, which is kind of hard, but basically looking from missing houses between 1982 and now. The criteria used for this specific list for the demolition ordinance is the properties listed on or having a state-provided determination of eligibility for the National Register of Historic Places. Properties listed on the Heritage Conservancy Register of Historic Places. Properties contained within the 2025 Lower Makefield Township Historic Resource Survey that have been documented by a qualified historic preservation professional, which is Jeff, to have architectural significance and integrity. Properties contained within the said resource survey that have been documented by us that are associated with events, persons significant to our national or local history. All right, Megan. I'm asking Megan is our liaison at the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office. Oh, God, I can't believe I said that right. And she's going to talk a little bit more about this because this is her life and her job. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Kathy. So just as a little bit of background, I've been talking to Kathy and Joe about this demolition ordinance for a while, and we've had some pretty extensive conversations about criteria and how you identify properties and prepare information to use to designate properties. And one thing we talked about very early on, and I think is really important to emphasize at the outset, is that our office, and in fact, the CLG guidelines, Lower Makefield is a CLG, so you're held to these standards, do not allow communities to use National Register listing or eligibility status alone as the basis for a designation. That is differentiated from what this proposal includes, which is using the 4 National Register criteria, but the Historical Commission locally is applying them to the properties in your community. They sound very similar, but they're actually 2 very different things. Ultimately, what we encourage in the CLG program and what we encourage in general in terms of historic preservation ordinances and best practice is that communities make decisions about what is significant in your local context. Certainly, properties that are listed in the National Register are significant to you locally, but use your own criteria to say that they're important. So I think that's a big thing I want to emphasize at the outset. I did have a question for you, Kathy, about your process, just so I make sure I fully understand what's proposed. Does the current process uh, require that the Board of Supervisors approve your list of uh, properties at the outset, or is that only if something comes up through an appeal?
It requires that that they're approved. That's,
Board of Supervisors stays on the call.
does he know I mean, Matt, if you're familiar with the ordinance, go ahead and answer.
Okay.
From my perspective, the Board of Supervisors would have to approve that list.
Thank you. So, my only sort of suggestion then, this type of designation typically exists through zoning. So unless you have some other provision in your, traditional zoning ordinance to allow a property owner to appeal um, their underlying zoning, then if the Board of Supervisors is approving the list, they have a shot at saying yes or no to properties. So I don't know that an appeal to them is necessarily helpful. If they've already heard, the historic significance of a property, have already had an opportunity to consider that. Certainly any information the Historical Commission provides, should be robust to the degree that it, fully it creates the foundation for the significance of a property. So that's my only other comment.
And I think that'll be helpful. So the ordinance, while it's posted on the website, has not necessarily gone out for public response yet or comment, although it has gone to the Bucks County Planning Commission. And so I think, Megan, at that time, well, I'll let you know when it comes out and you could.
Great.
But what it does say now is that we send it to the Board of Supervisors. They actually approve it. Then the property owner is notified, because once it's put on a list, it needs to be divulged in any kind of real estate transaction. And then if it's on that list, then there's an appeals process. So.
Okay. Anything else for Megan? Questions for Megan, or did you have any other questions, Megan?
I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you for all of that. Very much appreciated. And hoping that we have you at our Board of Supervisors meeting when we get there.
Very happy to do that.
Okay. Demolished properties. I said this as far as the tracking. Currently, Lower Makefield has no way of tracking this. I asked them to get me data on the last 10 years of demolished properties, and they were not able to do this. So this is the information that I've put together to the best of my obsessive ability. Property losses from 1982 to 2007, there were 20 properties that these are what I could verify, 5 of which were on the Pennsylvania Register. That registry is no longer in existence. It was at those times. So not to confuse all of these different registrations. Okay. The yellow highlights are for those. I've talked to Jeff about this because he was involved in the 80s survey. They only used parcel numbers. They did not use street numbers. And because film was film in the 80s, they only took pictures of the best houses. So we only have so much data from that. One of the losses in the 90s is this one, the Palmer Farm. This is the photos from the Pennsylvania registry. This was on Stony Hill Road. We now have the property losses from 2007 to current day, including 3 that have been approved and are also on Jeff's list. Although I guess, yeah, he studied them. So these are the ones, 3 are in process or have just been approved. This one in particular just gets me every time I see it. This is one of the properties that was demolished. It is? Okay. Joe. I showed him that. Well, that's good because it would have been a damn shame. Okay. This one, I know there was a big ruckus about. Yes. This is a fairly recent, approved demolition. This is a situation, I'm calling it demolition by neglect. I guess I would say by the time they demolished it, it was in. Yeah. There it is. That's what they're building. It looks like a hotel.
Place where you can drive stuff.
Okay, well, we don't have to go into all of the. You have to come up, if you have public comment, come on up. Sorry, you got to do it. You got to be on the mic.
You have 5 or
The property, there's no, because there's no demolition ordinance, this was a 17th century home that got turned into this. It is a house.
Was that he had a doctor living there who had treated soldiers after, but you know.
I don't want to do a deep dive because I want to get into the stuff. So right now, there's no procedures. Somebody wants to demolish their house. They essentially go through the permitting process.
no, you pay more money if you want to demolish them.
No, this is why we're working on this ordinance. I mean, nothing about getting paid for anything.
We are trying to encourage people not to demolish, but just if you're going to make a monstrosity, just keep the historic.
All right. So in the survey, this is one that was interesting because in 2007, it was actually kind of a hot mess. And now look at it. So I wanted to put in a nice story too. All right. So these numbers are a little factored, but we're doing the grouping on the pre-1900. So Jeff rated on a level of 1, 2, and 3, and I will let him explain each level. I'm going to show you an example of each. Do you want to explain the levels first, though, Jeff? I think it's probably how you did 1, 2, and 3.
Primarily based on having done 16 national other 30 or 40 were not approved. So this based on a combination of big and pump. Very well. Some sort of historical figure, it's 4 criteria or and integrity. Of the 2, integrity is much more difficult one because no real definition. There is a definition that's that sense things. So basically, the rule of thumb that I've tried to use is simple. Is if I say the home of John Slack in 1884, he recognized it where he come down to the bed. And then you say, well, he would, but, or he wouldn't, or no, it doesn't get all the same. That's where it gets difficult.
Oh, so annoying. No.
So we said 1900.
Mhm.
So we looked at all the ones from that movie. And also, when the survey was done in the 80s, a number of other houses that were owned were included. I have them all listed.
Do you want this on?
No.
Like, because you can't hear what they're saying, so.
Oh, did you hit the button with the is it green?
How about now?
Yes, there you go.
I apologize. Green button was on.
Thanks,
It
Meg.
was on. Okay, so
Should have explained.
so there were a number of buildings that, when Heritage Conservancy, and I was one of the two people doing it back then, saw a building that we thought was potentially significant or might be considered so in the future, we added to the list. So for today's purpose and the fact that there's this limited budget, and we can't do all that was there, we're focusing on ones that are 1891, except what I've done is I've gone to several sources, including old newspapers and the Philadelphia Builders Guide, which was published, and any building that was designed by an architect that's listed in the Philadelphia Builders Guide, I've gone out and identified where they are, and they are going to be added because that's, I think, a very interesting thing that, not to be a snob or anything about wealthier houses compared to all the bungalows that there are around, but I just try to figure out some way to begin the process of the more recent buildings. So there were about 160 buildings that were from 1891 or earlier. I say about because several were inaccessible, so the numbers won't work out exactly. Of which I thought 40 were class 1. I thought at the other end of the scale, there were 43 that were class 3, which is they're older than 1891, but John Slack wouldn't recognize them very easily if he could walk down the road. No, yours was not one of you, that's. But, and yours, that's a good example. That's
My son's house has so many additions
Right.
to it,
and
and the earliest portion of it is probably 1690.
well, and that's the hard thing is that there was no records of 1690. It's about feel and other things. So what I've done is when I've been very conservative in dating, I'd rather have it what it looks like today and be pleasantly surprised than misstate something because of whatever reason. And we have a real world example right in Washington's Crossing where a house was known as a Charles Taylor house, built in 1820 for the last 80 years. And Megan and I talked about it today. Someone inappropriately stripped the stucco off, and there's a pre-Revolutionary War building that was swallowed up. So well, that's the big caveat. So there may be things much older, but their present appearance, and I will defer to Megan if she wants to opine. When a property is reviewed, you don't review part of a house. You review the entire house. So that's another thing. So so there's 43 of those, 74 that are in the middle, which were 2, which is what you would think that they're either not completely preserved or they're vernacular folk houses, generic, and good examples of nothing significant, but it's part of the tapestry of the community. So that's what we come to. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that I've also documented the barns. I know that's not part of this focus, but when I was out there, and Lower Makefield has lost about 90% of its barns over the years.
Just thinking as we were talking about the barn at the Prickett property. All right, this is currently under construction for a restaurant.
All too familiar with that.
Yes, you are. So the issue right now is with the Harb upset about the fact that they've installed huge air conditioners on the roof.
Helen, I don't want to get into like Harb stuff. I want to stay focused on our list. Please.
That's a good point, because that's an issue of integrity.
Mhm.
It's obviously, it was at one time a significant building, English Lake District barn, relatively rare, and gone. And you also had some double-decker barns in the township, which all have been demolished since 1980. I don't think any left.
And the cabines, yeah,
That, just got completely wiped out recently.
totally.
So that's what I have done. And like I said, focusing on those that appear on the 1891 atlas and then taking photographs. Where possible, I have knocked on every door that I've gone on private property. I've been remarkably impressed by the friendliness of Lower Makefield residents, having done this for almost 50 years in many communities. Only one person said, I think the township should have called us in advance, but everyone else has been extremely helpful. There are still a dozen or so properties that I have questions about, either the tax. Let me take a step back. The Bucks County tax records are often well over 100 years wrong in the date they give properties. But any property they've given a date of before 1900, I want to go look at. Some of them I've driven past 2 or 3 times because you can't tell that they're there.
One problem I've noticed on your list is that every one of the schoolhouses are showing up as 1870s. And that is because that's when the school district put it back on the tax list.
Yeah,
So the
public school,
buildings
the
are
public school
actually.
laws passed in 1834, and a number of them, are from that period. But that's what we're doing. Like I said, a
Well,
couple-
for the sake of tonight, you and Jeff and Joe will have a meeting to flesh out specific dates. Yes, but for the sake of tonight, the years don't matter except prior to 1900.
Here's 1900.
I know, but it doesn't matter if it's 1830 or 1870 for the sake of tonight. This one, and I think it might be the wrong address. I think it might be 1472, Newtown, Yardley Road. So this is the one that, you designated as a one. And I know you were kind of, I think, excited about some of the Rev Gore stuff around it.
Well, to really, not to drill down and geek too much, there's an architectural feature of southeastern Pennsylvania houses that typically only appears before the Revolutionary War, which is segmental relieving arch above the window openings and perhaps the door opening. That has this on a portion, and I think we're 3 or 4 others in the township that do. So, with the exception of the Ferry Inn at Washington's Crossing, which we having a lot of problems dating, I've not seen those being post-revolutionary.
Lloyd House has them.
Mhm.
So that's what this has.
Right.
So then in this case, we actually have a orphans court document, which I've downloaded from the county, that shows a building on the site in 1830. So I've done a lot of that, trying to flesh behind some of these
Mhm.
assessments of age.
Right. And this is number 2, and you kind of called it out specifically as one of our few remaining farms. The thing on the left was when they did the 1990 book, this was kind of how they covered it when it was researched historically. And then, oh yeah, so this is more pictures of the farm.
And that barn, for example, I found newspaper advertisement when that barn was built in the 1890s. So it's got a cinder block foundation. It's very unusual for.
Awesome. And then this is the number 3, 30 Maple Vale, the toll keeper's house.
Us today.
Yes, you and I discussed it today. And what did you tell me?
I could hardly recognize it.
Yeah,
And
that's why
Megan
it's
is
number
sitting here.
3.
We talked a little bit about the National Historic Landmark being amorphous and whether or not this is part of the National Historic Landmark because it is a toll house or lock tender's house, I guess. Is the
Mhm.
wrong term, rather. It has very little integrity, and
Mhm.
that's an issue that we face with houses.
Yes. All right. And then the home most at risk right now is this River Road home. This is why we've been really pushing hard to get this ordinance passed. It's verified, Jeff verified it back to 1858. There is some speculative of an earlier date, but that's the verified date that we have. It just sold. You gave it a 1 for integrity, and we also have a local resident, George W. Justice, who lived there, which gives us other criteria on
And
this
he-
one.
He got insurance and that's how.
Yeah, it was insurance is how you proved it. Yeah.
He was a guy who handled the estate, breaking up of the Longshore Estate in Yardley. He was a prominent local person. Yes.
Quick, just showing you some of the National Register homes in our area. There's these 3. And then there's some determined eligible. And then we have a list of the Heritage Conservancy Historic Places Register. We have 2 on those that are designated a 3 on the list.
That list started in 1976 or 78.
Thank you for giving context for
and
that.
That's why some of them
Okay.
no longer be eligible.
I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
I'm going to figure out how to share my screen. Okay. Always. Yeah, I think okay.
So while he's doing that, Jeff, how do you feel about houses that the integrity is compromised by materials that could be easily removed by a subsequent owner?
I hate to say it, I put blinders on. I put blinders on. This is what it looks like today. And so I recognize that is possible, but highly unlikely in most cases.
No,
Few far
it's
between.
happened on this
Yeah,
list.
but it's, so, and we don't know how they're, we don't,
We have previous pictures of the house with the original stone.
as
show.
if you are restoring it or rehabilitating it and making it look like it did and not using historic materials and fabric. So that's why it's hard to answer the question.
But how do we rate it is the
I
problem.
rate it as it looks today.
So
But then how do we document that for, say, the next owner?
Well, what we are doing, and I'll give up the floor in a second, is every one of these properties that has photos has got a folder associated with it. And materials such as historic documents I found, Orphans Court, newspaper, anything I find are going in those folders. And where the landmark booklet that was put together, I put some of those in. I even have the 1876 lithograph of the Dana House that's down
Yeah,
in Buckingham.
I know where
You
that is.
So anytime there's a historic image that I have ready access to, it's going in the file or in the folder. And so that's the only thing I could say.
So at some future point, we would have a folder on that house for, say, a new owner coming in and wants to see the history of that house.
There's already an extensive system of shared folders on your server. I am adding all the material on all the properties that
Okay,
I'm doing.
put the Nixon house in there.
okay, let's go. So how do we move from what Jeff talked about in the historic resource survey to what we're proposing for the demolition ordinance? And very simple. The very first thing that we did is we took all the properties on that list before 1900 and chose the ones that were rated either 1 or 2 from an integrity point of view. So in the list that I sent out, which the commission has seen, there are certain times things are highlighted in yellow or green, or I'm sorry, brown, which means that is either on the National Register or has been determined eligible for the National Register. What is in green are the ones from the Heritage Conservancy, okay? So Kathy went through all of those criteria. Now, since I sent that list out, Kathy and I reviewed it again, and I had to take a few things off. The first thing I took out of the list were all of the houses in Edgewood Village. And why did I do that? The demolition ordinance does not apply to Edgewood Village. Edgewood Village already has a traditional neighborhood overlay that has its own demolition ordinance in it. So for any houses that we're proposing, the Edgewood Village houses aren't in there, so I took them out. The second thing is Kathy had told me that a number of houses here have already been granted demolition permits. Again, we're not going to be able to grandfather those in. The permit's already been issued. So in this case of Lyndhurst, I had to take that out. Okay. So what I have here, and there's 2 lists. There's the proposed list, which I really don't think we should be having a lot of discussion about because these are the things that we're saying should be protected. The second list, which I'll show you, is the ones that we chose not to propose. That's probably where we have most of our discussion. Okay. So list number 1, it's here, proposed, I forget exactly, there was like 110, I believe, structures or buildings that are being proposed to be protected by the demolition ordinance or to be subject to the demolition ordinance. The second list is the list that's not proposed. And simply, that's the way that we just broke it up for this is we took everything of level of significance 3. So it means it doesn't have architectural integrity. And we put those on the not proposed list. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not significant because we may come back and say it doesn't have architectural integrity. From an architectural point of view, it might not be significant, but someone really famous in the township lived there, someone very important in the township lived there. And that fits into the other criteria that Kathy overlaid. Is it a significant person or a significant event? So what we need to do as a commission is look at that list and say, which of those properties actually should belong on the proposed list and why should it be there? Because it can't be because of architectural significance, because Jeff ruled that out. It needs to be for another reason.
What's the yellow on this list?
What's what?
The yellow, the things highlighted on the second page on this list, the yellow.
So
Yeah.
these are just notes where he hasn't determined the dates. He was saying before that he's looking at the dates that were given by the county records, but he needs to go out and assess the house himself.
Okay.
There's one that Kathy and I talked about today that it's probably not worth doing any more digging, but there are a number, and there are 2 houses in the township that the county had a date of 1700 on, which is pretty incredible. One of which, when you look at it today, it does have segmental relieving, which is a portion, but it's clearly early 20th century, it just was completely enveloped. So you have to take that with a grain of salt, but that's was something I'd like to do a little more digging, and that's what I've been doing.
I can't see this list at all, and I really don't know what houses are on it. But I would suspect a pretty ugly two-story house with a peaked roof and not very well-kept siding attached from like 1920s, sitting on a substantial lot of land would be very endangered and would be one of those houses that we would probably look at and think, oh, what are we going to fight about this? You know, I mean, it probably dates, it's Moses Suber's house.
Do you have an address or
I
anything?
can give you the address. It's on Big Oak Road, and it's right backs up to the 5 Mile Woods. It's on a 9-acre piece of land.
Okay, so Google's, okay.
Well, yeah, so, right, so the house doesn't have architectural integrity. So what reason would we give?
It's an 1850s house, okay, so.
Okay, but age itself isn't a necessary indicator of historical significance.
Was the soldier who was killed in the Civil War in our cemetery, the only one who actually died in the Civil War.
Right.
But
But then that's important then. So now you're right. So that's a good example of a house that's probably on this list because it failed for architectural integrity, but you're making the case that it's still historically significant, not based on the architecture, but based on the person who owned the house or built the house or lived in the house. But we have to have documentation to that.
yeah, so what happens is what I'm saying.
Well, right now, it's probably not, it's probably on this list I'm showing you right now,
Okay,
but that's the question is which of these houses on this list get moved to the other list?
no,
Let's go back to my earlier point about not being.
that one might be,
Certain
that
segment
one
of the
might be
population
ready.
never built nice houses. Doesn't mean that their story shouldn't be told.
No, you're right, but
And that's.
That's the problem. No, that's exactly it. It's a
But
typical.
it's difficult
Poor
when the
person,
survey is based on a drive-by.
right.
It's difficult, which is why I believe, we're going to
We
get
have to
together and
dig
go over the
to
list
in.
one by one and look for things that are documented and,
I'm pretty sure it probably has a wood stove.
Well, I mean, here's the thing is, as we said in the beginning, a homeowner can appeal everything. So I have a list of a few properties Jeff and I were kind of exchanging emails about before that are on number 3 that we have extensive documentation that I pulled out on that might be worth giving a look, say, to. So maybe we start with those. I'm gonna need you to share screen again.
hold on. I think
I don't
Helen,
know if I think conversation we've had in one of our other meetings is, do you want to be inclusive or do you want it to be limited so that enforceability is a little bit easier for the township? And I don't know if Megan's got any background from other municipalities, but you can put all 300 properties we found on the list. It's just going to be a burden.
right, but I mean, then I think we would be challenged by our board of supervisors because what basically has been said to us is age alone is not an indication of historical significance. So we have to be able to justify along the criteria that Kathy listed, why something is on the list, right? And
One of the problems is that we need to do a chain of title too on most of these properties that are questionable, just to make sure that we've got all the.
I've done a number of those already and we'll continue to do
There's a
them
couple
as
that
time
I
and budget
would
allows.
See the chain of title.
I mean, the good
What
news,
you just showed me, Monica, there's a house out there somewhere along that road that was owned by a guy named Redding Beatty, who was a doctor in the militia, Revolutionary War militia, and he lived in Lower Makefield till about 1835. He's buried in the Presbyterian churchyard in Newtown, but very important figure. Apparently very valuable at Valley Forge. So, I mean,
the ordinance though, doesn't require a one and done approach to the list. It basically says that we can at any time send another list or an additional list of properties.
if
to
a
the Board of
developer
Supervisors.
decides to buy the piece of land, that's the problem.
No, you're right. But, so I guess there's 2 points. If there are things that are on this list, there needs to be a justification, and someone needs to do that. And doing chain of titles aren't necessarily always going to be that easy, right? So I mean, that work needs to be done. So my question is do we hold up everything until we vet all of these number 3s? Or do we move forward with the list that we have in order to get 110 houses protected? Again, it's not, demolition ordinance doesn't protect them. It just tries to slow the demolition process and document it, but subject to the demolition ordinance. And while we work through the others and then come back with a list that says there's an additional dozen here.
Well, I guess we've
that are
pretty
reasonably
wasted that time is what I'm saying.
Well, the last 2 months I've asked you to give me properties. This is the list that we have, and if we don't give this to the Board of Supervisors, the demolition ordinance does not proceed, and we will lose 743. So if you want to get closer to the screen so that you can read it, and like I said, I pulled out some heavily documented number 3s. I came in today.
Here's my problem with this list. If I get a property number, I've got to look it up on a map somewhere to see where it is. Okay, this doesn't give me any information about where exactly that house is.
It is. There's a street name. There's a street name and a parcel number, Helen. Look,
Yeah, but
it's a street name.
Yeah, I have no idea where that is, honey.
Okay, well,
This is
why we
problem
send it
I
to
need
you
to leave
immediately.
you. I need to connect this list before. Jeff's other list was more useful because it actually had the name of the house or the local name that somebody, Florence, I think, had given it. So I knew exactly where it was and which house it was. I know these houses by their names and their histories, not by a street address.
I would presume a part of this process would be for permission to ask the GIS department to create a map that is key to tax parcel numbers. So anyone who wanted to would see it. And I have examples of those. We do all the time. We did at Heritage, but I think that is a next step. Process is where, I mean, the system, I can't talk. Where in the process does that come? It's going to be done. It has to be done. People will know, but
Well-
that should not be a stumbling block. That can be done.
This is on the list, yes. Because it doesn't have architectural integrity.
Well, we were asked to bring an expert in because the Board of Supervisors wanted us to have an expert do it. So we are not challenging architectural integrity. If you can tell a historic story about the house, that's different. We can bring it in on A or B.
Yeah, and I think, Helen, you have a ton of amazing stories, and any of them that hit this, I think that's what we're doing, is looking at this list to make sure we don't lose. And I'm sure there's some things that you have, and especially.
Railroad tracks would be on your left.
441, I don't know. 441 Heacock.
I'm pulling it up for you so you can see it.
No, yeah,
So it'll be on your left as you're driving toward the railroad tracks. It's got a yellow Cape Cod, and then there's an older house that's framed next to it. That's Dr. Whitecraft's house from about 1860.
Jeff, on the spreadsheet, there are two separate columns. One says, I hid some of your columns, right? One of them is address and one of them is historic resource name.
441.
And right now, they're both being used for an address.
Address.
Also, that's Diverse's house.
Yeah. I don't know if it just-
Okay, yeah, that's, yeah. Okay.
Right now, in your spreadsheet, there are two columns. One says historic resource name and one says address.
Significant because you want to see Bucks County Republican Party headquarters for every election in the 1950s and 60s. Just saying.
I'm sorry.
On your spreadsheet,
Yes.
there are two columns. One is historic resource name.
Right.
The other is address.
Right.
Right now, both have the address in them.
That's because not everything has a historic name.
Right.
And that came from this, I don't want to throw Megan under this, that came from the PA share master list that we started from.
Right.
And
If I-
what we know the difference. You can see some of them aren't that way. Or there's a column right to the far right, which is associated person.
I saw that, yes. My question is, can we blank the historic resource names out and put in the names that were used in the previous surveys? Like or the files that we're finding that Ralph had, that we can actually use the names that people in the township recognize?
The short answer is yes. The question becomes, are you going to name it for the person who built it or the person who lived there the longest or the person who lived there in 1988?
Put a name in, but I mean, but I mean, these properties were all named, or not all of them, but properties were named. So not everyone's going to have a name.
Right. And not all with all due respect, not all the names that were given actually relate to the building that's there today.
All right. Now, it wasn't really our intention to use this meeting to go one by one through that. So what needs to happen is, for the things on the not proposed list, Ellen, I'll reformat it again. I don't know. I'll try to find some way to get it big enough that you could see it. But if there are houses on this list that should be on the proposed list because they are associated with an event or a person, please indicate them, but we also are going to need documentation behind it. Because I think here's what I don't want to have happen. I don't want to put something on the list, have someone come in and say, this house isn't historic. It's been completely redone. There's vinyl siding on it. There's aluminum windows. Oh, but we say, but it was associated with a person from the Civil War. They'll say, prove it. I mean, when an appeal comes for this, we are going to be the defense attorneys on it. We're going to be the ones that have to defend the property, and we're going to need to have the documentation to defend the property. I'll leave it to the chair to decide if we wait until we flesh that out or we move forward with the proposed list.
What I would suggest is that the commission, that we would entertain a motion to approve the list of 1 and 2 and send it to the Board of Supervisors. As this has been a pressured situation because the Board of Supervisors is not going to is not going to hear anything on the demolition ordinance until they have a list of homes. So this has been done faster than I think any of us would have liked. I would like to send those that we know have 1 and 2 integrity to them. That's somewhere between 105 and 110 houses, depending on who's counting. And then what I would suggest is, as Jeff is finishing the historic resource survey, which he is still working on, if you have information on these 3s, you can give it to him, and then we can do a second list.
This Historic Commission is the one who's responsible for creating the inventory.
Okay, so then if you then have, okay, yeah, that's fair. If there is information that is documentable on the 3s, you can bring it up at another meeting and we can send another list to the Board of Supervisors. But if we don't do it now, Helen, we're going to lose 110 houses.
Jeff, my son Tristram asked that you take the word hotel off of the usage for the previous,
That's a category from PHMC.
yeah, well, he says there was no documentation that was ever a hotel.
There's a newspaper advertisement that roll-off is
It's
open
a
to hotel.
boarding house. It says a boarding house, so he wants it to be a single-family residence usage all the way along.
Well, again, that's its current usage, and that's what it says.
Yeah, so boarding house would be okay, but he does not want hotel, bless.
Boarding house is not a category that comes up on PA share.
Well, he doesn't want hotel, so good luck.
Well, I mean, then he can, when it's in PA share, he can send a message to the state to appeal.
And from my point of view, and I'm not as emotionally invested in this as you guys are, just based on my experience and my time in this, but obviously I'm here and it's very important to me. I am frustrated that the Board of Supervisors have put us in a position where we have to rush through this. But I also see the point of it, because even in our rushed talking, we've basically lost 2 houses, right? So without understanding all the ins and outs, I think this makes sense, not showing them 3, but presenting 1 and 2, and then adding to that as we have time and their attention. But if we have their attention right now, I don't see why we wouldn't jump on it. I am frustrated with a 2-stage process. But to me, that makes, from my understanding of how things work, that makes the most sense, to get what we can real quick and then keep bringing others in.
I would just say, Monica, even if the demolition ordinance was in place today, no house would be protected because this process hasn't carried out. The demolition ordinance doesn't necessarily, it basically says there's going to be a list, and right now that list would be empty, so nothing.
Right.
So we have to go through this process.
Right.
Right. So,
No, it makes sense to me that we do this and we pass these 1s and 2s, but it sounds to me like we are able in the future to add to that list. So why wait, right? Why
it's
wait?
not a one and done.
Yeah, most.
No, we still have,
The list can be amended. It's right in the language, first line, sentence or 2 of the ordinance. This list, as amended from time to time, shall be.
Right.
So yes, you can add and you can take off if a building is,
We have a couple of taverns, then we should probably put in there too.
well, what I would suggest to the chair is, I think it's better to take the master list that I've started, add a column for any information that we have that then can be used in an evaluation. And then when you resort the list from that list, all the information is one place. So it's not, some of it's not on this list, but not on this list. It's
agree.
better to have a broader list and then do what you've done, pare it down. So I'm willing, as the chair says, meet with Helen or any part of the committee to go over these individual ones on a screen that can be read and be happy to put in another column. As there's a column for the comments from 1980, there's a column for comments that I've added as part of this survey. And I would argue it's better to have more information than too little, and then be able to shrink it down rather than say, that list that you're submitting has got notes that's not on this list. So
No, you're right.
want somebody to come and say, well, it's not on this major list. How did you get this information? You want it to be defensible.
Right.
I would argue,
Mhm.
since we do have time in the budget to do it, we do it as much as we can now.
That would give you the opportunity also to add the historic names for some of these houses, such as
Yes.
Green Lawn or, Yes, okay.
If we can track those down.
I'm a sticker for verification.
Yeah, I mean, we have some information here. I mean, because the other thing, Helen, is that he is still completing the historic building survey, which is separate. And there are other significant homes on there that are post 1900 that we are going to want to get on the list at
Yeah.
some point.
Mhm.
Some of these.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is definitely not one and done. So again, I concur with our consultant's recommendation. And I cannot make the motion because I keep being made chair. Would like to entertain a motion to accept the list with the ones and twos and send that on to the township, and let's get this process moving.
Someone make that motion.
I move.
I will make the motion, as Kathy stated, that we take the existing list, the existing proposed list, minus the modifications that you and I made the other day. And we send that to the township as the first version of the township historic inventory list to move forward with the demolition ordinance.
Second? Mitch? All in favor?
Can I have that?
Discussion.
Oh, sorry,
I
discussion?
don't have it all, Joe.
Can you do that again?
That we take the distributed list, township historic inventory proposed,
Yes.
minus the modifications that Kathy and I made last week where we crossed certain ones out. And we send that to the Board of Supervisors as the first version of the township historic building inventory for the demolition ordinance.
I guess I should also say, we always kind of forget because we don't usually have public. Is there any public comment on this vote before we do the full vote? Okay. All right, so Joe moved, Mitch second, all in favor?
Aye.
Nice. Unanimous.
And then with regards to the rest of the list, so just maybe recap. On the historic resource survey,
Yes.
Jeff, you will add another column around significance, and we should probably use A, B, C, D, just, okay, you know, and if things are significant because of a person or an event, we use the appropriate A and B designation, okay?
Got it?
Okay. And then also under the historic resource name where we can, where we have
Right.
a name that's widely accepted, we'll put one in there.
I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Then, okay, then the other thing that needs to be done is, Helen, we need then to review the non-proposed list, the other names that are not proposed, and we need to make a case for historical significance for those.
With the second list.
For the second list, okay?
So I might suggest that, I know you said you were willing to meet with Jeff and Helen and kind of go through that? Huh? Oh, you're not back to August. Okay, so Helen, Jeff, are you okay with meeting with Helen and just
Love to
tweaking it out and enlarging the font? Which I have to do also.
It would be nice, yeah. It's a lot.
Get it on one.
You get a bigger sheet of paper. And Steve has a printer. Don't.
All right, so in the meantime, you and Helen will connect
I
and
will-
kind of, she could give you the historic names.
Do that. Well, we will review the comment what you said. Take the existing list, add a column for significance, historic name, and a column saying where those things come from that are verifiable. And perhaps raise it from a 3 to a 2 based on the information that we're now adding.
Mhm.
So that when you go back to a revised list, it won't be 40, 74, and 43. It may be all but 20 houses.
Mhm.
Or not, or then it will come down to somebody making a decision. every property has history. What about history makes it significant? And you got 5 people there and 5 people behind me. I'll bet you get 20 different versions of what makes something important. Or if a certain event happened there that, say, Jeff Marshall lived there, does that make it important in other people or not? So it is like grasping clouds. It's not a finite or definitive system we use. Again, Megan's sitting through this whole thing. She can attest to all the National Register meetings and other things and reviews they do where it's many shades of gray. And when you get a committee of people, you'll get many different opinions on the exact same historic resource.
So Jeff, you're saying you will stay with the same 1, 2, 3 for level of significance?
Yes, and I will meet with Helen and see if there's material that I think might warrant a change in the level from 3 to 2.
But the new column will be the criteria. Is that level based on A, B, C, or D?
Yes, or some combination thereof.
Okay. Yep. Good. That would be helpful.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Any public comment? Everybody just wants to go home? Yeah, he wants to go home.
Can I make one totally unrelated comment? But because Jim isn't here, he was going to speak briefly on the ghost tour advertising. We're going to start earlier this year, and I don't want him to do the majority of it. I want him to wrangle everyone. So we're just asking everyone, keep in mind a short list of 2 or 3 businesses in the area that you know or you have a connection to that you could speak to that might be interested in advertising in the pamphlet, because they will. Everyone I ask always does, but it would be nice if all of us just brought something, even volunteers back there. Any ideas you have, email them to me or Jim so we can get on that before the summer's over. That's all.
Megan, did you have any other kind of feedback, thoughts for us or anything you wanted to share before we?
Last
Nope.
thing I'll say is let me know what support you need moving forward. I'm always very happy to assist you guys. I know you've been working hard on all of these things, from Slate Hill to the demolition ordinance. I know you've all been putting in a lot of hard hours, so tell me how I can help and support.
Yes, we will definitely do that. And when it's on the agenda at the Board of Supervisors, you will be invited. Thank you.
Megan rocks. Thank
Megan
you.
rocks. Megan rocks. Does rock.
Thank you, Megan.
Jeff,
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
do you have any suggestions for what to do about Nakashima houses?
I think we can go talk to Mira, see what their records say, what they have. If there's some verification that's documented, the work of a known master is one of the criterion for significance. As I said, I've started to go through, and he doesn't appear on this because he's too young.
No.
But what I've done is
like-
I've gone through the builder's guides, and like I say, I've gone and documented buildings that were designed by architects. So that's a criteria
Right.
I am using. But I have
Humboldt.
not seen anything that verifies Nakashima building anything.
I haven't.
Okay, next meeting, July 9th at 7:30. Motion. Go, Joe.
I motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Bye.
We're out,
Thanks, Monica.
everyone.
I just wanted to ask you that on record. I don't know if you'd allow us to do it. It's right on Joe Street. Joe? Joe,
What?
it's on your street.
What?
Nakashima House is on your street.
So much.
On your street. Westover. It's about 2 blocks down. It looks like a block of concrete with brick face. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Usually has a red truck in front of it. A red truck in front of it. It's on the downhill side. No, it's on your street, downhill side. Hi, Jeff. When do you want to meet?
Tomorrow I'm busy. Find my number.